Hello, and welcome to Metachemistry. This is episode 118, and we have another mission briefing episode for you today. And so these are episodes where we take an ITS mission and we kind of break it down. We go over the basics of scoring and how the mission functions, and then kind of go into ways to approach it, things that you might find desirable in your lists, things to keep in mind while you're playing, and all that jazz. And for this, we're going to talk about the new mission that was revealed for the Interplanetario / the Corvus Belli Krug, and that is provisioning. And so provisioning, I believe, technically is an ITS Season 17 mission, but will be present at the Interplanetario to finish off ITS 16.
Yep. Yeah, so it will definitely be a 17 mission is what it sounds like, although maybe not in this exact form is what it looked like they were saying. Might be a little bit of revision between Interplanetario and Krug, and then when the official Season 17 packet comes down.
Right, so these are some things subject to change, but it should give you a broad overview, at least, of what that's going to look like. And speaking of the Krug, we hope that those of you who are able to make it, because they did fill out all 120 slots, we hope you're excited to make it out to the Corpus Belli Krug. Both Ian and I will be present, so you can swing by and see us, and we'll be around. We'd love to sit down and chat. And if you're attending, you can get your room at the Curtis Hotel that weekend. There is a link in the Corvus Belli Krug Discord and Facebook group. I will look at getting those available in the Metachemistry Discord as well, and see if I can put some of these in descriptions of the places that we host this episode. So if you haven't yet, go take that link, book your stay for the Corvus Belli Krug August 22nd through 24th, and yeah, we're excited to see all the people that are going to make it out. It looks like it's going to be a real big event, so I'm super excited. But before we start talking about provisioning too much, we also want to give a shout to Mo Games, which is a sponsor of Metachemistry. And Mythic's Online Emporium is an online supplier of Infinity, and you can find them over at mo-games.com. And as part of that sponsorship, all of our paid patrons will get a 10% discount code at their store, and we raffle off a $40 coupon code each month for anyone who's a member of the Discord, whether you're a patron or not. You just need a US shipping address for Mo to send to. And so to join in for that, you just join our Discord server, and we'll raffle that off. Because what's better than games? Mo Games. And talking about provisioning tonight, it is Ian and myself. So, Ian, I know that this is a very new mission. This has just cropped up recently with the Interplanetario announcement, but I think we've both gotten at least a game. So these are almost first impressions with a little bit of experience behind them. But yeah, it sounds like you've been able to get some games in lately, which is great.
Yep.
Hopefully that
We
means
had
things
a
are calming down a little.
local, 1-day 3 mission tournament yesterday, so it's very fresh in my mind. And we did play provisioning as part of that.
Very cool. And so yeah, so at least you've been able to get, another 3 games to make up for the last couple months, maybe, of having some sparse Infinity games. But yeah, how did the event go for you?
It was good. So we ended up having 10 people show up, and I took 5th place, but we had a weird thing occur in that 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, we all scored the same amount of tournament points and objective points, and our rankings came down to victory points, of which, because I tend to be a very attritional style of player, I do not mind losing models, and I will sacrifice models very readily if I think it'll further my objective in the mission. So I did come in a little bit lower on the victory point part, but I thought it was interesting how many people, how many tiebreakers we had to have. 4 different players.
Right.
having the same score and having to go to the second tiebreaker stat for that. I thought it was quite interesting, kind of showing as well how skilled or how high the skill level in kind of some of the local meta is, that we can get that kind of level of consistency where everybody's scoring relatively high because they're playing the objectives. And yeah, it's a solid group of people, which all of them I believe will also be at the Krug.
Yeah, definitely. One of the perks of being in the area for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, which is yeah, that's pretty wild. I feel like, especially for such a small event, being 40% of the of the participants all tying on the first couple metrics is pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's like everybody had like two majors and like a loss, and the guy that won
Hmm.
had two majors and a draw.
Yeah,
So it was a pretty cool event and a lot of fun with people I enjoy hanging out with. So yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, very cool. And for me, it's mostly been organizing our local game nights. So that's been going well. Attendance has started to pick back up again over the last couple weeks, which is great because after running the escalation league, things kind of fell off, which, that always happens because there's not that same impetus to play, or some people want to take a break or whatever the case may be. So it's nice to see those numbers kind of creeping back up again after that. And so I've been trying to focus on a single faction, and I have played at least like 4 games of Kestrel consecutively. So
I'm
it's
impressed.
almost like picking a faction.
Did you play any of your lists twice?
One of them, yeah.
Oh, progress.
Yeah, yeah. I know there's definitely a history of me. I like to test things out and try things uh, frequently. And so, yeah, I very commonly will write a new list every single time I play. Not always, but I probably haven't played in all the years of playing Infinity. I don't think I've played the same list more than maybe 6 to 10 times on the high end. Is probably right. Like, I
Yeah.
don't think I've gone the same event running the same lists. That wasn't a 1 day event, obviously. So I like to try stuff out. Leave me alone.
It's all good.
So, as far as our main topic for the episode, we have provisioning. And so, provisioning is kind of an oddball mission in some ways, or at least it's very different to existing ITS missions, most notably for the deployment zone, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But Ian, do you want to give the initial breakdown on the mission objectives for provisioning, just so we kind of have that baseline of what we're trying to accomplish?
Yep. So first off, this does have one tactical support option, so you will need the uh, resilience ops part of your deck for the objectives to get that. Figure out which one you get.
Gross.
But then, yeah. I know I like it. I actually think it's a lot of fun on the tactical supports. I got to give in the one we played yesterday. I got to give somebody a reroll. One specialist got mission reroll, which was actually awesome because it really helps in this mission. I actually didn't end up
For
needing it,
sure.
but like potentially because you do need to make a lot of rolls in this mission to do the objectives, because
Fair.
it's basically supplies but turned on its ear. So
Sure. Yeah, at a very cursory level, supplies is
yeah,
close.
so you have three tech coffins, and instead of being placed across the center line of the board, they're placed diagonally from corner to corner, one in the center and the other two 16 inches apart in a line. So they are still, three tech coffins. At the end of the game, you have to pull stuff out of the tech coffins, the supply boxes out of the tech coffins. So at the end of the game, you get one objective point for each supply box. The difference here is the central supply box or tech coffin has two supply boxes in it. So There's actually 4 supply boxes instead of 3, like in supplies. So 4 points total there. At the end of the game, control more supply boxes in your own safe area than your adversary has in their safe area. And that's worth 3 objective points. Now, safe area is interesting because each player places a 5-inch round template somewhere on the table outside of either player's deployment zone. And you can deposit your supply boxes in there, and you count as controlling them even if you don't have a model touching them. And there's actually a penalty. Only enemy specialists can take them out of your supply zone. Not, nobody, regular guy, you can't just run in there and grab them. Only an enemy specialist can take them out of your supply zone, and he has to make a whip -3 roll to do it with no bonuses. So it's an interesting, different aspect to it there. At the end of the game, if you control the same number of supply boxes in your safe area, then it's 1 point each, but only if each player has at least one. At the end of the game, if your adversary does not control any supply boxes in their own safe area, that's 2 objective points. And then there's 1 classified per player to make your 10th point. The whole safe area thing, this is kind of the first of the big wrinkles in this mission, different from supplies. The other is going to be the deployment zones.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is the first time we've seen a rounded deployment zone, and I believe it's the first corner to. Well, that's not true. The N5 core book had a corner again diagonal to the opposing corner mission, but this is the first time we've seen a rounded deployment zone. So this is a 24-inch radius from your corner of the table, and then your opponent 24 inches from the corner of the opposite table, which is really interesting. It feels a little more cramped because it is just less space.
Like
And
it's less, but it's also more. It's different.
well, I just mean mathematically, like there is
Yeah.
less area to deploy models. It is a smaller deployment zone,
Mm-hmm.
but where you're able to place relative to your opponent is pretty different because
Yeah.
since you're both placing as much as 24 inches forward from opposing corners, you feel closer than
You're
you typically would.
potentially just over 16 inches apart, I believe.
That sounds right.
Yeah, it's like just shy of 17 inches at the closest points.
Yeah, so you can kind of get up on your opponent much more readily, at least in some cases with that. Because, yeah, I tried this with just using my normal table setup without trying to keep in mind the corner deployment zones and just set it up in a way that would be typical of me to do so. And it was really interesting because there
Mm-hmm.
were like high points that normally I would never put in a deployment zone, but were available with this, quarter circle that you have access to. But it didn't feel lopsided because the other side kind of got something similar, and there were still variances in the deployment zones. But yeah, it was interesting to see how much the layout affected that. And I wanted to try that just because I feel like oftentimes people are not necessarily going to set up the board specifically for this, just like they don't set it up with shortened deployment zones in mind for Biotech 4 or when Power Pack was in the season
Or
for
longer
broken
ones
objectives.
for missions with 16-inch deployments. Sometimes a
Mhm.
sniper nest sneaks into that zone on a
Right.
16-inch. Feels very similar in some ways with this.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that while some people will, use that and actually apply the terrain layout with the consideration of the mission, I think it's more common that people will just set up tables kind of how they normally do. And so I wanted to try that, and I think it was pretty interesting. It worked out well. It didn't feel wildly unbalanced or anything like that.
Yeah. I think it was interesting on the table that I played on because it didn't feel it didn't feel like either side gained an advantage
Mhm.
necessarily over the other based on the deployments being awkward, but it definitely changed how I deployed a lot of stuff in order
Mhm.
to take advantage of what was there. I just don't feel like in general it gave me or my opponent an undue advantage over the other player.
Sure.
Because if I
Yeah.
pulled something janky, they could pull the exact same janky and did.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And we'll talk about some units that are really interesting in this mission here in just a little bit because yeah, it can make a big difference on how you view the table. But as far as the mission goes, again, you have the three tech coffins spread out among the center diagonal line of the table between deployment zones. Those each have a supply box, except for the center, which has two supply boxes. A specialist needs to extract a supply box,
Hmm.
which is just a normal whip roll. This mission does have a forward observer bonus, which is very, very rare. In fact, I don't remember the last ITS mission that had a forward observer bonus off the top of my head. I feel like
I
it
know there
was,
was one, but I'm not remembering which one specifically right now.
yeah, it is very uncommon, but
It's
as
usually
per usual,
doctor, paramedic, or engineer or hacker. So I'm
right?
like I'm happy to see a forward observer one because I feel like they're the forgotten specialist.
It's because they're so cheap and everyone has them.
Yeah, but like nothing is outside of what one classified really specifies that you need a forward observer for something.
I don't think even the one, right? Because you can get the same one with Spotlight, both the
Yep,
telemetry
yeah,
and designation.
yep. Because you can also get it with spotlight. So
Yeah,
it's the forgotten child of the specialists.
it's the Specialist Operative Plus.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they get the bonus, which, as per usual, is +3 whip and an extra roll, which of course is very potent, especially if you're trying to take supply boxes out of an enemy safe area. Because once supply boxes are out in the open, anyone can pick them up. You can hand them off, and none of that requires rolls. It's just a short skill to do so. Each model can still only carry one supply box, like usual, unless you have baggage, in which case you can carry two. And you can't go into a marker state while you're carrying a box. But in the safe area, it's like you have to extract it again, essentially, except now it's harder. And being able to deposit it there is really interesting to me. And that puts some interesting possibilities and considerations into how you place your safe area.
Hmm.
Because as a short skill or ARO, you can just drop a supply box in the safe area if you are standing in it or have moved through it in the case of being active. But yeah, so that ends up being really interesting as a way to kind of take your useful specialist or your mobile trooper or whatever it is and kind of get them back into the mission instead of necessarily having to hand it off to another trooper. They can hop into that safe zone and drop it and then go back to another objective
Hmm.
and grab another supply box.
Yep. Oh, and another part, so like controlling a supply box, you have to be um a player but not a marker is carrying it, and normal as that. But yeah, it very much specifies like if it's in a safe zone, it is considered controlled unless an enemy specialist trooper succeeds at picking it up. So they have to get in there, they have to touch it, they have to succeed on the roll to pick it up to take that control away from you.
Yeah, which makes it quite a bit harder to grab those. I mean, at least if you're a forward observer, at least you're back to flat whip and you still get two rolls, which goes a long
Um,
way.
Actually,
Oh, is
you
it
don't
not?
get the forward observer because the forward observer only applies to the extract a
Oh, on the
supply box
extract skill.
skill.
That's right, because it's a
So
specific
yeah,
skill declaration.
yep. So yeah, there
Good
is
call.
no bonus to pick up a supply box in a safe area.
Yeah, which, for those who played season 10 with the Xenotech, you'll know the
Yeah.
pain.
Oh, yay, Xenotechs. I didn't mind that season. I liked a lot of what was going on.
I like the ideas.
Yeah. I'm not necessarily the Xenotech. I liked a lot of the other parts of that season.
Sure. Yeah. So, that said, that kind of gives us an idea of kind of the lay of the land and what the mission looks like at a kind of a high level overview. So, that said, Ian, what are some things that jump out to you as far as things that are going to be valuable in this mission that you will want to try and put into your lists, more or less, regardless of faction? What sort of unit archetypes are you thinking?
So I went into building my list for this mission in the kind of the view of it's a variation on supplies. So things that work in supplies are probably going to work pretty decently here. So with that said, specialists with forward deployment or infiltration, you can't go
Hmm.
wrong with them.
Yep.
Uh,
Perennial
g-
choices for sure.
yeah, the game I played, I had a couple of Nokizaru with forward deployment +8, which puts them just off of the central beacon or the central tech coffin. And then I had a couple of Kuriyami with infiltration. I had parked at the other ones. And then when I got to go, I just grabbed all the boxes and ran away, which is kind of my
Yeah.
MO for supplies anyway, where it's like, I'm going to. Here's my 4 chasseurs that are up here, and I go first, and I grab all the boxes and I run away. So
Yeah.
it's very similar to that. I will say that an observation that I had is that based on the deployment zones, it seems like they kind of force a lot of what you're deploying into kind of a big scrum in the middle of the board around that central objective
Sure.
because of just the shape of it. And so things that are good and fighty and resilient at close range going into the kind of the center of your deployment zone towards that center objective would be decent, but things that are more speedy, more maneuverable, more long range, I would put more towards the flanks going at the other objectives.
Hmm.
Like bikes would be good there. Things with HMGs, sniper rifles, stuff like that, better on the flanks in my opinion. In the center, templates, Spitfire, anything that's really going to be more in that shorter range band, heavy armor, things like that. CC specialists, I think those work great in the center, but yeah, I think it does really kind of push a lot of the action towards the center, and a lot of the flanks are where you're really maneuvering stuff around and trying to jockey for position instead of just brawling.
Yeah. Yeah. I could definitely see some of that as well. Like, one of the things that stands out to me in this mission is airborne deployment,
Oh yeah.
particularly parachutist. Like, combat jump does what combat jump normally does, but parachutist, considering you just need to not be in the enemy DZ, gives you a lot of options to
Mm-hmm.
come in. And with how tables can often be set up, there are commonly places where I'll see things, I'll see setups where there's not terrain touching the back deployment edge, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, of a player's deployment zone normally. Meaning you could easily walk on with, say, a Spitfire combat jump trooper and, move around a corner of a building and start shooting into the side of several troopers in short order after another.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you can, and things are generally more clustered. So fast units, I feel like, have more to do just because things are a little bit more condensed.
Yeah, this is like a Garuda's like wet dream mission.
Yeah, a little bit.
I
It
mean,
is.
and I say that just because the thing is so fast now.
Hmm. Yeah, it can. I think the closest point it can make it with a move, it can get to either of the side objectives from where it parachutes on. I believe the math checks out on that it's less than 12 inches or
Yeah,
about 12 inches. But either way, I mean, you're not grabbing it that order anyway. So if you need the extra 10 inches of movement,
but
you'll
yeah,
have it. And they have a forward observer specialist option.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like
Love
that.
Garudas.
Yeah, they're just nightmarishly ideal for this. Mm.
Yeah, so being able to move fast is beneficial in all kinds of missions, honestly. Like speed is order efficiency, is really what it boils down to. Maneuverability is order efficiency. And having units that can take advantage of that really goes a long way. And one of the nice things about going to that example of Garudas again is that one, they can be a specialist, they get a bonus, they are just about as fast as any of the vehicles, except they can actually touch things and do stuff.
Hmm.
Whereas other vehicles, I think, can be really interesting attack pieces,
Hmm.
but they're not going to get the mission done for you. They can never pick up a supply box, for example.
Yeah, but a meteor Zond can.
Yeah,
Like
Meteor
that's
Zond would be
actually
a good option.
yeah, 'cause it's a forward observer, can parachute
Hmm.
in. It's fast. Uh, like that's a pretty solid option if you're playing nomads.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's a good option to run in and grab those things. And so, as always, tools to kind of stymie enemy movement is going to be important when you have objectives that you can then retrieve and move to a more secure location.
Hmm.
So, being able to slow your opponent down so they can't just run this as deep as possible, into their safe area or their deployment zone or wherever. Because really, all you need is one supply box in a safe area to get the points, as long as your opponent doesn't get any in theirs.
Yeah,
And that's a 5 point swing, 3 for you having more and 2 for your opponent having none. So if you can clamp down on the enemy safe area, that's going to either net you or prevent your opponent from getting quite a few points.
yeah.
Um,
So
Speaking of which, go ahead.
what I'm saying, in area denial, you're kind of your classic stuff of mine layer troops, especially if they have infiltration or forward deployment of some type, that are going to be able to get stuff up closer to some of those, especially the objectives that are on the flanks.
Hmm.
Uh, Deployable repeaters, anything like that, depending on what they're throwing at you, that you can use to throw some level of hacking defense or make them take dodges or saves or dig out an angle to remove a crazy koala, whatever it is. Like
Hmm.
those, I think, pay dividends in this mission.
Absolutely. And I think that something like infiltrating snipers, this is the scenario for them. It is so much more likely along this diagonal that you can find a place to take those shots across the board and into the enemy deployment zone and be, you know, far away from their troops pretty easily and just throw shots at angles that would be really difficult to deal with if somebody doesn't have a good tool for, say, a Mim 6 hidden deployment sniper.
Ninja sniper.
I mean, that is one of those. That's true. I was thinking things with maybe higher ballistic skill, but you're not wrong. But as far as the safe area goes, I think that there are, at least from initial play and viewing the scenario, I feel like there are, and Ian, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this as well.
Mhm.
If there are kind of two modes of thought on how to play the safe area, and I feel like those are generally either near the objectives so that you can drop them off quickly and have a very aggressive play with your safe area, or you tuck them back towards the sides of one of your the sides of your deployment zone, and it's much more defensible and harder for your opponent to get to once you start dropping supplies there.
Mhm.
Do you agree, or do you feel like there's some other ways to look at that?
I think there's well, those are both good. I think there's a third way, and this is going to be very dependent on whether or not you or your opponent is the ones that have kept deployment. So I tried to do this, but did not get
Mhm.
to do it because my opponent went defensive and they put theirs way back. And so I went aggressive and placed mine like as close to the center objective as I could so I could just grab both of those boxes and throw them in there and be done. But
Yeah.
my initial thought was if they placed theirs somewhere reasonable that wouldn't be too much of a hassle for me to like go if they tried to go aggressive.
Mhm.
I was just gonna drop my safe zone right next to their safe zone and be like, fine, grab something and drop it in there, and I'm just gonna come steal it and drop it in mine.
Mm.
And yes, I know that you could do the other, they could do that back to you, but
Sure.
it's my plan, so it's gonna work for me.
Fair enough.
But I unfortunately did not get to be a dick bag, so
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that definitely comes across to me as, like, another method of aggressive play, but yeah, if they're playing theirs fairly defensively, it really I feel like that only work like, that's still an aggressive mode of play because you can't really do it if they're playing defensively.
yeah,
I mean, you can, but it just makes it harder on you all around, which doesn't feel
exactly.
like it's worth the benefit. So I feel like that kind of falls into the aggressive bucket, in my mind at least.
Mhm.
Like, put it where it's most convenient, but not necessarily as defensible, or vice versa, where it's more defensible, but it's harder for you to get some of those supplies back into it.
Yeah, I definitely did put mine on the side of the central objective that was closer to where they placed theirs, just so
Mhm.
that if they did manage to run and grab something over there, that it would be just slightly less distance for me to steal it from them and bring it to mine. But
Sure, yeah.
you know, but whereas I could have put it on the other side of kind of the farthest part of the radius and made it
Mhm.
farther away, which would be more defensible slightly, but
Sure.
neither here nor there really.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. So, yeah, I think the main tools, like we said, are fast and/or advanced deployment specialists are going to be helpful, which is true in all kinds of missions, of course. Anything without an exclusion zone really appreciates infiltrating camo
Mhm.
specialists or similar. But I think that, yeah, defensive tools, especially like infiltrating mine layers or things like that, will go a long way as well.
Yeah.
Like Ian had mentioned just a little bit ago, and trying to find some ways to cut off access to those objectives.
Yep.
Solid, hard ARO pieces, of course, are going to be useful, particularly if they can have MSV to see through smoke, for example, and take that tool away from your opponent from actually giving them any safety.
Yeah.
Again, something like a black air comes to mind,
Mhm.
which is
So in like my game, I got the two no Kizaru forward deployed right up near the objective, and my opponent dropped a Moran right opposite of them with the crazy koala out. So,
Mhm.
and of course the repeater and everything. So it was like, okay, so I'm not going to have to be able to go for this right now. I got to take care of those things somehow.
Mhm.
And of course, they were in areas where I couldn't easily target them.
Right.
So it was a good play, but I managed to work my way around it through basically sacrificing one of the Nokizaru because I had two of them there, and that
Mhm.
one, the one surviving, was able to then just grab both boxes and drop them.
Nice. Yeah, Morans are so good.
They are,
It's like all the kinds of area denial you would want, just about.
yeah. It's just one of those like I'm doing this, huh? And then oh, you're doing it back to me. Fine, dig myself out of this hole that I put myself in.
Yeah. So, with this mission, how do you feel about looking at initiative? Like, is this something where you feel like you're going to snap lock first, or want to snag second, or rather deployment and hope that your opponent gives you second, or something else?
Um, So it's like one of those things where a lot of people that play supplies like to go second because then they're like, well, if they pull the boxes out, then I can just kill their guys and steal the boxes.
Sure.
And and I can just whatever their boxes are, I have the last word. I can go kill the thing and steal the boxes, which is true, but only if you can reach the boxes.
Right.
And so in supplies, I actually prefer to go first because I just like to grab the
Hmm.
boxes and then run as far away as I can, and then make you chew through my entire force to come and get the boxes from me. Like it's a thing
Hmm.
where I play supplies and I try to work it so that I have the full allotment of objective points by the end of my first turn, and then it's just cleanup
Yeah.
and forcing
Yeah.
you to kill through my stuff. I feel like going first in this mission with my play style is even more beneficial
Hmm.
because of depositing the boxes. It's no longer a matter of you kill my guy and then take the box. It's you kill my guy and then you have and rolls to maybe pick up the boxes. So I think that aggressive going first, grabbing stuff as fast as you can is a even more viable play style in provisioning than it is in supplies.
Yeah. I would agree. I feel like this is definitely a mission where, unless there is a significant advantage in deployment, I would choose first turn.
Yeah.
Like it's not every single time sort of thing, but I feel like it definitely is first turn oriented, which is probably the only part of the mission I don't care for, because I generally prefer missions that incentivize going second,
Hmm.
because obviously first turn already has the incentive of being able to start wearing down your opponent's forces and orders before they begin play. But yeah, I agree. It feels like a go first in this mission if you can sort of mission.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's the way that I play normally. This fits very well into that.
Sure.
I regardless of mission, I will almost always choose to go first unless the table has something with the deployment zones where one side is just overwhelmingly more advantageous than the other, or there's
Hmm.
something where it's maybe not that bad, but there's like a sniper tower and my opponent's playing something that has potentially a really good piece to put up there, that I'm just like, I really don't want you to have that. Then I will take
Yeah.
deployment. Um, but generally, I like to go first for many reasons. It is not always to my advantage. I just really like it. I want to get
Sure.
all the
Sure.
use I can out of my stuff, but
Fair.
is what it is. But yeah, I feel like for this mission in particular, I feel like even though going second gives you the last word, the extra roadblock from needing specialists to make rolls at a penalty to pick up objects out of a safe zone that while potentially under fire is enough of a
Hmm.
detriment that I really don't see going second as being very advantageous in this ever outside of a really egregious mismatch in deployment area.
Sure. Yeah, and with the penalty from that safe area, even, you know, pretty good models in terms of specialist options are not really much better than a coin flip
Yeah.
to actually succeed. And many models are exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be most specialists are going to be whip 13, and they're going to be it's going to be a 50-50 after this. And then if you happen to
Mhm.
have a couple of hawk models, just some aleph models, that you might be getting an 11 or a 12 afterwards.
Right. It's okay. It's just you just got to bring in an anathematic.
Yeah,
Take that
yeah,
whip 16. That'll be great.
yeah. I mean, just deck down to normal levels.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree that that makes it much harder to just do a run and grab. Because not only is there the penalty, but you have to actually have a specialist model that can go do this. And while if you have someone who is going after the objectives pretty hard and you're able to either sneak around in areas where it's hard for your opponent to see the tech coffins, or through canny use of visual disruption of a variety of kinds, can get to those without having to engage very heavily, it's pretty reasonable to grab several boxes and put them away. And you can kind of keep using your best option to do it because they get to drop something off again instead of needing to spend orders running back to your other models or moving something up to pick up the supply box from that trooper as you might in supplies.
Yeah,
And yeah, so I agree. This definitely feels like a much more aggressively slanted supplies in that
yeah,
way.
and I liked it. I liked it a lot. I think the deployment area makes it interesting enough. Because if this was
Hmm.
supplies with a fourth box and you have to drop it in zones, but it was across the normal horizontal with a normal deployment area, I I don't think it would be that interesting. I don't think it would be like why are we going to play this over supplies? But I think what makes the mission, honestly, for me, is the deployment area is different enough that you have to approach and think about how you're deploying, how you're activating and moving stuff, potentially even more so um, what you're taking. Like I said, if it works in supplies, it works here. But I do think that there is some customization towards this that could be warranted. Like you talk about infiltrating snipers or um, the more heavy armored brawler stuff in the center of the board to really pin down that central objective. There is some stuff in that is warranted. And so I think that that deployment area and how that changes up the approach to the mission makes this interesting and fun and not just a well look we have supplies again with some modifiers. It's a significant enough change that I think it's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if, which it sounds like this is most likely going to replace supplies in ITS 17, is at least kind of the impression that I
Mhm.
have. If it was standard deployment zones and everything else were the same, I think it would be a reasonable swap.
Yeah.
But here, I think with the deployment change, in addition to like the safe area, I feel like the safe area is a really big change in how, like we just talked about, with how it makes it part. That's part of what makes it more aggressive. But I think that with the deployment zone, I could even see them be side by side in a packet and
Hmm.
not feel like they're redundant, even though they have some similar mechanics.
Yeah. And I agree. Like I wouldn't be sad if we got this in addition to supplies in 17 or whatever going forward, because
Sure.
they're just different enough that they play just different enough with this that I think that they each can stand on their own separately.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, a big part of that is the deployment zone
Hmm.
bit. If it was a standard deployment zone, it seems like a fine supplies replacement.
Yeah.
But with that, I feel like they're definitely more distinct.
Plus, I like it because how I don't want to say boring or stale because I don't want like because I love the missions in general, but it's like
Mhm.
when every mission has some variation of 8, 12, 16 straight across, it's kind of like okay, so we're going to I feel like there's just not as much variables to make things interesting. This is part of why I love a mission like Power Pack, which has the two corner deployments in each for each player
Sure.
because it is different, and that brings in a whole different thing where like parachutists can just walk on the backboard edge because it's not part of the deployment
Right.
zone, and so it adds this whole new element to that how that mission would play versus if it had just a standard deployment zone. And
Hmm.
I really like Power Pack a lot because of that, because it does force you to approach it from a different angle. And that's where I'm really liking provisioning, is because by doing these corner rounded deployment zones, it really just opens up new interesting design space that we haven't had in Infinity before. So I like that a lot.
I am glad that CB is experimenting with some of these things.
Mhm.
I wouldn't want more than a couple oddball deployments
Yeah.
in a packet overall, with over say the 20-ish missions or however
Yeah,
many it ends
like
up having.
Power Pack, this, maybe one more.
Exactly, because I think that it just makes it too much of that makes it tricky to one adequately prepare. I think it makes onboarding harder for people that want to play events that, oh, well, you have to memorize or think about or
Mhm.
prepare for a different deployment type for every mission or something like that. Or
Yeah.
rather, an event, even a 2-day event, could potentially have a different deployment map for every mission, which puts more strain on table requirements and makes things a little bit more confusing, and it's easier to overlook and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
I like having it just kind of sprinkled in just a little bit to add some interest, but I hope that it's not,
Mhm.
you know, more than like 5 missions or something like that where there's
Yeah, yeah. So
significantly different deployment zones.
I've been doing this long enough where it's like you see the same missions season after season after season, and even if a mission goes away, it comes back the next season or something. And yes, they will change minor details of them between seasons, and that's fine. That's awesome. But it's just like, okay, so how many times have I seen this mission? All right, yeah, we're doing this again. Okay, it's fine. So I like seeing something a little different. Um, and this is a cool way to play with the deployment zones, still keeping the game in that symmetricalness of how the missions are set up,
Mhm.
which I think is important because I would love to see more asymmetrical missions, but they feel like it would fit better in, say, a narrative mode than
Right.
in a tournament mode, because it's super hard to balance. And I think they've done a great job with resilience ops for that kind of asymmetrical thing, because you're not going for the same objectives potentially and you don't know what your opponent's
Right.
doing. So I think that kind of fills a lot of that niche of the asymmetrical mission. And then of course the classifieds outside of, like a highly classified or uh what's the other one with all the
Countermeasures.
countermeasures, highly
Mhm.
classified or countermeasures where you're going for the same classifieds and it's public. But like your normal classifieds, it has that element of asymmetrical objectives. Like, yes, you each have one. They're going to be different probably, but you each have one, or however many are in the mission.
Sure.
But this is a deployment area kind of stuff, is a bit of a design space that I like that they're experimenting with, because it
Yeah.
allows for that more variation while still keeping things even between the players, depending on terrain setup. Because again, deployment needs to be a choice. It can't
Sure.
just be
I
go
agree.
first all the time. Deployment needs to be a valid choice too.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, with that said, I think we're just about ready to transition over to final thoughts on this new mission on the horizon here. But before that, I do want to give a quick shout over to our patrons and say thank you for all the support that you give us. We really appreciate those who are able and willing to provide for the show financially, and it really helps us reduce out of pocket costs to make things happen. We have some special projects in the works again. And so that really helps us. We're looking at expanding our content as well as we're doing some support for the Krug, and so we are one of the sponsors for the Krug this year. So we're doing a little bit of extra swag for that, and you are how this happens. So thank you. We really, really appreciate it. And if you're interested in being a part of that and kind of helping us continue to grow, you can find us on patreon.com/metachemistry. And we give some benefits back to kind of show our gratitude, like final voting rounds in polls, early access uh, to our episodes, our Discord. You can have some private channels that are patron only for all of our paid patron members. And you can also join our Patreon for free if you just want to kind of see our posts and kind of keep tabs on what we're doing. Also, in the show notes, as always, is our Discord, which is, other than those aforementioned channels, is free and open to anyone in the community who wants to be a part of that with us. So if you're looking for another place to chat with it about Infinity, um, you can find us and say hi. We are here and we're talking about lists or new updates or people showing off their awesome paint jobs or great terrain and tables and all kinds of stuff. So if you need somewhere to vent more about Infinity, you know, come by. We'd love to have you. So with that said, Ian, final thoughts on provisioning.
I like it a lot. Um, Initial, when the mission dropped, the initial reaction was like, "That's really weird. I don't like this." And then the more I thought
Different
about it, I was like,
bad.
"Oh, yeah, yeah, exactly." And then the more thought about it, and some discussions in the community, I was like, "Okay, let's give this a shot." Okay, I mean, new isn't always bad, and then like throwing it down, and honestly, it was the deployment zone was the thing that was like weird because it was like,
Hmm.
it's curved and it's gonna be a thing, and it's like it's actually not that hard. You just measure from the corner. Is it within 24 inches? Cool, you're good, or whatever your additional range happens to be before deployment. It's fine. So it's like, okay, no, this is actually not a problem. This is actually super cool. Let's give this a shot, and loved it. I think it
Hmm.
is a super cool mission. It's very refreshing to get something that is new, like this, that is so different from a lot of what we've done before. So yeah, I think it's great. I'd like to see, like again, not a lot, but a few more things like this filter through the ITS seasons going forward. I think that
Hmm.
there's so much potential for this, and I had a blast. The mission was just super fun to play.
Yeah, I enjoyed the, like, I say, 1.5 games I've played of it as well so far. It is different. It is refreshing, and it yeah, I feel like there's definitely a bit more inaccuracy of measuring the deployment zone and things like that that can be a little bit tricky, but there's always a little bit of that with terrain, even on straight deployment zones. I think that sometimes just happens. But yeah, I would recommend just taking a little bit of extra time to look at the table and check your DZ, because I think that you'll find when setting up for provisioning that there are angles that you might not expect to
Mhm.
have, or areas where, oh, oh wait, I can deploy something over here. That would be great for, whether that's a lane for a specialist to advance towards one of the tech coffins, or some sneaky spot that has a good line of sight for a defensive piece, or anything in between. So, yeah, definitely practice with this a little bit and kind of spend some time with the table before you commit too heavily in deployment, or even choose deployment if you get the
Mhm.
option. So, yeah. And for those of you who are going to come out to the Krug to play it, we're excited to see you. Make sure to say hi. We'll be there, and we're really excited for this really big event. And yeah, it's only going to grow from here. I think is how
Yeah,
things are looking. So super excited for that. And on behalf of Metachemistry, this has been Devin.
and Ian, and that's the meta.